Welcome to Viseland. In this episode, we got a really good topic that's going to spark a lot of discussion. So, Mikey, what are we talking about today?
We are going to delve into what we call the worst of the best to ever play this game. So these are going to be the 10 worst MVP winners of all time, which we find to just be an absurd topic, which should be a lot of fun.
It's an oxymoron, but these are the guys, and they won the award, but you were sitting there like, no, but someone else should have won it.
Not even that. We're doing this by their careers, so it's not necessarily the guys who shouldn't have won the award that year, though in many cases it will be that way, and we'll delve into that as well. But these are just the guys who we feel are the worst players to have won the MVP, which still makes them amazing players.
Yeah.
And gives us a reason to talk about 10 of the best basketball players of all time.
Totally.
Even though some of them may not be of that echelon. And we're going to leave, obviously, a number of players near the top out of all the players who have ever won MVP. But we have a nice list here of 10 guys who probably aren't going to be on, your top, 25 list, let's say. But they're hovering around there. At least the last couple are. And, we left a couple guys who you could probably go one way or the other on. We have some other ideas too for future episodes dealing with people who maybe didn't win MVP or along those lines. But right now we're doing the top 10 players. So we're going to start from 10 and go to 1. We did rank this list of the players we feel have the worst career of somebody who won the MVP award in the NBA regular season.
Yeah, and if you want to speak on behalf of a player that you like, definitely let us know in the comments. Send us an email, viselandpod@gmail.com. And again, full scrub disclosure. We are not NBA players. These guys are still great at what they do, but in the sense of what they do, we can still talk about them. Yeah. So let's start off with number 10.
Yeah, so number 10 is our lone two-time MVP winner. Canada, you're going to be pretty upset about this one.
This is going to get us a lot of heat.
Yeah. I chose Steve Nash. Now, you could feel Steve Nash maybe deserves to be higher on the list. I went and checked the ESPN top 74 players of all time list, and Steve Nash actually was ranked behind the player I had 9. But I feel like Steve Nash had a better career than him, had 2 MVPs. And both of the years he won MVP, I feel that first year they made such a huge turnaround. They were a really exciting team as well. And the thing I think you'll see here is in terms of MVPs, it's about storyline. A large part of it is about storyline, about what's happening in the league at the time, all those things. Great performances abound for sure, but sometimes it's voter fatigue, it's storyline. And the story that year was Mike D'Antoni had the Phoenix Suns playing super exciting basketball that was also very successful. And they went from 29-53. They add Steve Nash and I believe a few other guys, but Steve Nash, of course, by far the best player.
And Amari, they get Amari, who starts coming into his own.
Well, he was already there.
Yeah, I know he was already there, but he's coming into his own as legit. And then you got the
Steve Nash obviously helping that as well. So that team had Steve Nash was actually the 4th leading scorer on that team, but averaged, I believe, 11.5 assists per game. He was clearly the engine that ran that team and had a tremendous season. The MVP that in that first year, so this was 2004, 2005, was a pretty close vote that he won over Shaquille O'Neal. And, you could kind of go one way or the other there. It was really close. The other player I saw from that year who actually didn't get any first place votes, but led the NBA in win shares, was also on a very successful team that season. Less successful than the Suns, but still he led the NBA in win shares, and it was Dirk Nowitzki.
Yeah, so those are some
And
prime.
on this list of players, there's one player tied with him for win shares per 48 minutes. That's Kevin Garnett, who I believe was still on a struggling Timberwolves team at that time. But yeah, it was really between Shaq and Nash for that first one. The second one, I think, was pretty hotly debated. And I felt that season, we just looking at the roster, it certainly looked like Kobe Bryant deserved a chance that year.
Yeah, and
He has yet to
that's
win
the
an
thing
MVP award.
about Nash's MVPs. Both of them kind of had a little bit of that, like,
Yeah.
and Nash was great in those years. You know, that those Suns teams super exciting. Obviously, lots of offense, not enough defense to get them to that next level. You know, in the playoffs, and
Yeah.
obviously, you know, Dallas went on to win with different point guard, not Steve Nash. You know, years later.
Yeah, but that was a while.
Yeah, after he and Dirk left. So yeah, like there's a lot there, but yeah, like it was an interesting time for the league too, because yeah, Shaq leaves the Lakers, so Shaq's kind of, you know, in Miami having his last couple years. Kobe's playing out of this world, but on some pretty forgettable Laker teams.
Yeah. That's the guy who finished second in 2005, 2006 was actually LeBron James. Dirk Nowitzki also leading the NBA in win shares once again at 17.7. And yeah, I felt like Kobe just that year, he averaged 35.4 points per game. It was the year he scored 81. He had a few other amazing scoring efforts.
Yeah, no,
And that team, the team Kobe Bryant took to the playoffs and gave the Suns a run for their money in that first round. The Lakers were actually up 3-1, and the Suns came back and beat them in 7 games. It just felt like it was Kobe's year, and they still end up giving it to Steve Nash, who had an amazing performance as well, because Amari Stoudemire had gotten injured, torn his ACL, and they lost Joe Johnson to free agency. It was like a sign and trade, but they get Boris Diaw, they get a few other guys that kind of pick up the slack. They had Raja Bell as well, and they end up being a not as bad as you would have thought without like Amare Stoudemire in the lineup and and Joe Johnson, because Steve Nash is so great, and you know Sean Marion specs up. A few guys pick up the slack, but I think they ended up finishing like 54-28, and people were like, "Holy cow!" Like Steve Nash is amazing for even getting them close to that record.
Oh, totally.
So it made him look really good that year.
Great shooter.
Certainly, LeBron James, I think, should have been in the conversation and probably should have had more votes. And I felt like Kobe Bryant was absolutely snubbed. Kobe actually finished second in first place votes that year and was 4th overall in voting, which just seemed absolutely ridiculous.
I think it was at this period too where everyone, you know, was either very high on, you know, a lot of people like to hate Kobe at that point too, and that, you know, like really they missed out on some great play of what he was doing, because that's really where the Mamba mentality of just scoring like basically any means necessary. Because yeah, Kobe really carried those Laker teams that were fairly forgettable until, you know, they get Gasol a couple.
Oh God!
A couple years later.
Look at that Lakers team that year.
Yeah,
just marvel at the fact that Kobe was able to
take them to the playoffs and be kind of competitive, and, you know, make something you actually want to watch. So who is number 9?
Oh, just to finish off with Steve Nash, I feel like he may be the best player ever to have never made the NBA Finals. And well, that could be a future list for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, Steve Nash, certainly one of the great players of all time. Unfortunately, 10 on our list. Number 9, this was the player who was ranked, I believe, 1 spot ahead of Steve Nash on ESPN's top 74 players of all time list. I guess that was the number of years that we played, or the NBA has been around. And this player was incredibly exciting, but there should be hot debate about whether he should have won the MVP this year. And while he did lead his team, a well-constructed team, to the NBA Finals this year, I think this certainly is an award that could be disputed. And the player I'm talking about is Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson is a player who was so exciting to watch, could just go on scoring flurries, was really, really hard, if not next to impossible to stay in front of, was just so shifty, and his ability to create space was pretty much second to none. Lots of people love to throw in the pound for pound stuff, but the fact was he was 6 feet and like 160 pounds. And
he was lucky. Like, if
still a scoring machine, but there were like deficiencies and inefficiencies that probably place him a little lower on the all-time list of players in most people's mind than in the general public's mind, where they place him as like being this demigod of basketball.
I think for Allen Iverson,
as a kid, I certainly felt that way. But
yeah,
looking back,
I think for Allen Iverson, at that time he was so influential because he was really changing not just the the way the game was played, the culture of the game, and that's where really like everyone wanted to emulate his moves. Like, I mean, the fact he pulled a crossover on Michael Jordan, like he tested Michael Jordan once. Michael Jordan was going to bite, and then he went for it. Like, but you look at his game in another perspective, and you're like, okay, he was kind of a volume shooter, not the best percentage shooter. Like you look at him, he's one of those guys. When you look at all time, it's hard to place like what other teams you would add Allen Iverson to.
Yeah,
like, he was
certainly that was the reason Philly was so well built. They just built this amazing defensive team around him, and he didn't necessarily have this second option. But he did have another bigger point guard to play next to in Eric Snow.
Yeah, that's why he has a bigger point guard to take some of the ball.
They get Mutombo. They just built this fantastic defense around him and just kind of relied him to score so much. He was relied upon heavily, and absolutely, I guess it seemed like his year because the year before Shaq had won it, and Shaq deserved a unanimous MVP the year before. Some bozo from CNN, I believe, voted for Allen Iverson for MVP that year, and just there was really no reason. And everybody, I think, they just yanked his vote. But the next year, Shaq finishes in third. Tim Duncan is second. Shaq leads the NBA in win shares. And I know that I believe Philly and the Lakers tied with a 56-26 record that year. I think San Antonio was 58-24. The Lakers go into the playoffs and just annihilate the West. They lost one game that whole year. I believe it was on my birthday when Allen Iverson went completely crazy. It was the game he stepped over Tyronn Lue. I think he had 50 points. They win that first game against the Lakers in the finals, and then it's a gentleman's sweep after that. But Allen Iverson had some tremendous moments that year.
Well, I think
Shaq only has one MVP is kind of ridiculous, though. And I think Shaq has a very legitimate beef this year for him not winning the MVP.
I think
he was clearly still the most valuable.
That most dominant player in the league. I think Allen Iverson, the reason he gets that MVP is just because, again, you pull him from Philadelphia, they're lucky if they win like 10 games. I mean, it was a team that was built around him, and he carried them with his ability to score.
Yeah.
Whereas like Shaq, Shaq was the most dominant play, dump it in the post, like done.
Yeah. But the other thing is it was such like the Lakers that year, Derek Fisher missed most of the year. And when Derek Fisher came back, that was when he was their third scorer that year. And that was when they really started to build some momentum and get it going. And I think hence the regular season, I wouldn't say mediocrity, but by their standards. And they had won more games the year before. So yeah, but
and then I think when Allen Iverson, again, when we were looking at that, he's zooming back out for his career too. It's like this was his best chance, pretty much. I mean, he never got.
It was absolutely his best chance.
He never got back to the finals. He never really got back onto a competitive team. I mean, he kind of got traded to Detroit, but that was kind of too late in their run too. So it's like, his career kind of had a pretty high peak, and then it just really lowered off once he didn't have that same role. Like he wasn't able to adapt, because you can't. It's a hard role to fill. You can't have a guy like Allen Iverson. Like he's not like Jamal Crawford kind of embraces this role of being like a volume scorer off the bench. I mean, you got guys like Lou Williams that done it in the past, but yeah, Allen Iverson wasn't that guy.
But Allen Iverson at the same time, yeah, like while he couldn't necessarily restructure his career to take that role, he was somebody that you would pay money to go see play basketball.
Oh, totally. And he was
an
in the league,
absolute
led
superstar
multiple times,
in that
led the league in
factor.
scoring.
Or what?
Multiple times, didn't he lead the league in scoring?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like
I'm just saying when we look at Allen Iverson's career, he was one of those guys who you could build an offense around him, and he didn't necessarily always have the most talent around him, or he never really found the second guy he could really mesh with. And you just kind of wonder if that player existed, but you just feel like if he could have had, or like a lot of people will mention a time like if he would have had the chance to play with Shaq or somebody like with Kobe and Allen Iverson. And while I do think that Kobe absolutely was the number one pick if you redid the 1996 draft, and I don't necessarily buy that argument, it would have at least been interesting to see Allen Iverson play along like a dominant big man like Shaquille O'Neal or somebody else, or have maybe like a little bit more firepower around him, so he didn't
I think like for him, like
5 shots per game.
I think him like some of the guys LeBron surrounded himself with, like guys that can spread and rebound and like do those kind of other things. Like Allen Iverson, he's gonna do all of that, and then just guys that can be dependable to hit those shots and really go hard on the rebounds, defend. The guy like LeBron's kind of surrounded himself with like this group of guys that have been able to like do that throughout the years, where it's like just get out of his way for like 60% of the offense, and then just be there when needed. But overall, like the lows of his career, it's like towards the end it really tailed off quickly. But it was never that he was a bad player. It was just hard for him to really like feel comfortable in those roles. Yeah. But I mean, obviously, like the kind of player you YouTube all like if you want to watch a good basketball moves, mixtapes, you want to learn a crossover, like sit at the mirror for a while, Allen Iverson.
Yeah, where kids look up Stephen Curry now, Allen Iverson was the Stephen Curry when people were growing up in the early 2000s.
Oh, more than I mean, again, it just like he affected the way that people dressed.
Yeah.
Dressed for like people wore
cultural icon.
Yeah, like the little arm sleeve thing that did not exist prior to Allen Iverson. Now you can't
cornrows.
Yeah, and you can't like not find those now, but it's like those didn't exist.
Allen Iverson bringing out the cornrows, I felt like everybody that had cornrows after that was copying Allen Iverson.
Oh. Yeah, the headband, the whole thing. So total icon, but yeah, like again, like when you look at all MVPs, people like that, like again, his career kind of gets put there, and this is a tough list.
Yeah.
So who do we have at number 8?
Yeah. Number 8, I went with Willis Reed, and Willis Reed didn't have the longest career, but he won 2 championships, and I think we'll see later on that maybe the year before this he probably should have won the MVP, but this year he likely, it was disputed at the very least. Like he had a few other players who probably could have laid claim to it, maybe had slightly better seasons. The Knicks were, I believe, had a better record than both of the other teams. He ended up getting 61 first place votes. Jerry West had 51 and Kareem had 30.
Rookie Kareem,
I think Kareem was the best player in the NBA at the time. Jerry West had a fantastic season as well, and I think the fact is that Jerry West never won a regular season MVP, and he won the first ever Finals MVP, which is the only Finals MVP from a losing team. But yeah, he never won a regular season MVP award, and this was probably his best chance to do so. but yeah, Willis beat him out. And
yeah,
it
interesting.
was that good record. The guy who came in fourth, Willis Reed's teammate, Walt Frazier.
Well, because
So-
those Knicks teams were all about balance. I mean,
Yeah.
that was kind of Red Holtzman's thing. Like, it was very, spread the ball, pass it around.
Yeah.
And they
had 60 wins that year. The Lakers.
They had a deep team. Like, they were.
The Lakers 46-36, and the Bucks 56-26, and that was Kareem's rookie year as well.
Rookie year, yeah.
So, certainly, I think the other thing that you'll see if you look at MVPs, record obviously plays a huge role, and as it should. Usually the key with being one of the best players in the NBA is that you're
on one of the best teams, yeah.
And I think at times you need to factor a few things in, and the team around you certainly is one of those things. And I believe Jerry West was on a very good team, and I think they actually ended up making the finals that year.
They lost to the Knicks.
They lost. I know they did lose to the Knicks. But yeah, it was at least it was a really close series.
Because that's the year where Willis Reed, he gets hurt, he comes back. Like, it's such an iconic NBA moment.
Yeah, and Wilt Chamberlain only played in 12 regular season games, so that was another thing.
Wilt's kind of in his last couple years there. I think.
No, but he had they come back in 71, 72, and they're like an amazing team. And yeah, I think Wilt just missed most of the regular season that year, but he played the entire playoffs. He played more games in the playoffs than he did the regular season.
Hey,
that's the amazing part.
That's load management back in the day. I mean,
if you could make the playoffs,
keep your guy fresh.
But just came up a little short. But yeah, so Willis Reed, I probably deserves to win the MVP. But yeah, I think that the factors in him being on this list are he didn't have the longest career. He plays 650 games in his NBA career, makes the All-Star team, and then takes a pretty steep decline as in 71, 72. It seems like the injuries that probably plagued him in the NBA Finals, where he famously comes out of the tunnel, makes a couple shots, and then
doesn't play.
On the bench for the rest of the game.
That was this
their inspiration, raising them up. And,
yeah,
it's an amazing NBA moment. But yeah, Willis certainly one of an all-timer, a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and those Knicks teams were kind of built for a lot of stars. I mean, there's a lot of guys who talk about from those teams that are in the Hall of Fame. So it's like that's where it also, again, it wasn't just his team. It was a bunch of guys could lay claim to being major contributors on the team, which eventually brings.
And he was the heart.
No, he was the heart. I mean, you pull him out of it, it's a totally different situation. But I think you needed him in there. But yeah, they were a great team, and I mean a gawky backup, post player for them ended up becoming one of the greatest coaches of all time.
Very true. Very true. I guess he apparently took a picture of the shot they gave Willis to help him fight the pain. I remember him telling that story. But yeah, Willis Reed, great player. He's 8th on our list. But again, we feel like morons, but we're being more absurdist than anything in doing this list, and just actually gives us a chance to go over 10 amazing players who all had incredible seasons to win the MVP award. So let's move on to number 7 on the list. And this is going to be yet another controversial choice. And everybody was kind of saying that a triple-double in a season had only happened once. Well, it turns out that this guy did it 3 years in a row. And that first year, there was plenty of hype going on about him having his teammate Kevin Durant had just left for the Golden State Warriors, and Russell Westbrook has this astronomical season and does it was in the records that they thought could not be broken which was getting a triple-double, averaging a triple-double for a
Triple-double. Yeah.
season,
Oh, it's no,
that Oscar Robertson had done, and I believe in the 1961-62 season. And then I know he averaged a triple-double over the first 5 years of his career as well, but I think only had that 1 year where he officially averaged a triple-double.
Yeah.
And then Russell Westbrook has this monster season. He is 7th on our list. I felt like this was also a contested MVP vote. He won pretty handily. He had 69 first place votes. James Harden had 22. Kawhi Leonard had 9, and LeBron James had 1. I felt if I were to have a vote that year that it should have gone to James Harden. A lot of people felt Kawhi Leonard was the choice. I believe if he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year, he was playing amazing defense. It's his best offensive season on San Antonio, and they had a great record as well. The reason I felt James Harden deserved it that year, I believe not only did Houston have a better record than Oklahoma City, James Harden may not have averaged a triple-double, but his numbers were just absolutely absurd.
James Harden's statistically always going to be pretty up there. I mean,
yeah.
The thing with James Harden too, he scores at such a great clip because he gets to the line so much.
Yeah. And didn't it seem like that year, if I remember correctly, I think he had produced, if you take his points per game and assists per game, because he led the NBA in assists. If you take his points per game and assists per game, I think he had the most points produced in a season that season, while also averaging 8.1 rebounds per game, was a bit more efficient than Russell Westbrook, had more win shares than Russell Westbrook. Kawhi Leonard had the most win shares per 48 minutes that season, which is pretty amazing in his own right. Averaged fewer minutes, played 74 games, whereas Westbrook and Harden both played 81. So I think it was more contested among the basketball fanatics than it ended up being amongst the media that voted on this award. Russell Westbrook, it's still really hard to take this away from him, but if I were to have a vote that season, I felt it should have gone to James Harden. You can say whatever you want about his defense versus Westbrook's defense, but I felt like James Harden should have won his first MVP that year rather than
he wouldn't.
waiting
James
that one
Harden,
more year.
First guy to win MVP to not be the best defender ever either.
Yeah, true enough.
He still does things that win your team games.
Yeah. But, well, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why he can get away with.
A guy you can build a team around.
Yeah, that's why he can get away with being a bit of a green light.
Yeah.
On defense, but yeah, Russell Westbrook. I mean,
it was like the season of Westbrook too. Like that was the other thing. It was the season of Westbrook. People were still super bitter that Kevin Durant had left the team.
Yeah, well, that's why
I think the storyline really played into it. And as we see, Russell Westbrook will be ranked ahead because this is a list where we're going lower in all-time rankings as we go up the list.
Yeah.
And Russell Westbrook's still considered one of the all-time great players.
He's still there, and paired with Harden right now. He's pushed, Brunson. He could move up here. And again, yeah, like a lot of that plays in. His storylines are always great if handling, Kevin Durant spurns you, going on and doing it. And again, triple-double, no slouch for 3 years in a row.
Amazing. It's an amazing accomplishment. And he's certainly been, one of the 10 best players in basketball for a number of years.
Oh, totally.
And you can want other players instead of him. Like, as you'll see, James Harden not on this list. I believe he's done enough in his career to get past guys like Allen Iverson and Steve Nash. I know that will be hotly contested as well. Just look at how many years in a row he's finished in the top 2 to 3 in MVP voting, though, and it's really hard to take that away from him.
No, he's really put himself on the map. Yeah, it's the beauty is we can always debate these things, but yeah, I think Harden's done enough.
Yeah, And as we see right now, like, while you can argue about their career and all the things, and yes, they were teammates on a finals team where Russell Westbrook was clearly a better player, but I think career-wise, James Harden has surpassed him, and as we see right now, when they're both playing together, James Harden clearly the superior player.
Yeah, like you need to get it to Harden.
Yeah. And yeah, so we have Westbrook at 7. At 6, this was a player who definitely was a great player on a number of really good teams. And I want to say he won at least one championship. I think he got to a few others. Yeah, he won. Yeah, only one ring, but he definitely had at least 3 other seasons where he was on a finals team as well. And obviously a player that was very well thought of. The MVP award was voted on by the players at the time. And he comes into the NBA as a rookie and wins the MVP award. And I'm guessing they must have had like an enormous turnaround. And they did. Yeah, 21-game turnaround. Leads the Baltimore Bullets to a 57-25 record. This is Wes Unseld, who is considered to be the guy when it came to the outlet pass.
The king. That's who like Kevin Love, especially like in high school, Kevin Love was all about that. Like Kevin Love modeled it after Wes Unseld, who played with Kevin's dad. I mean,
as we see in the Uncle Drew commercials where he goes by the name Wes.
Yeah.
And
it all comes together.
Yeah. I feel like if you're looking at the seasons, and yes, I wasn't alive during this time, it's hard to see how Willis Reed didn't win the MVP this year. If we went by analytics, and I don't think players were necessarily going by that, and yeah, the Knicks finished 3 games behind. I think Willis Reed has the clearly better season. Hence why Willis is ranked a little 8th instead of 6th. And I know on the ESPN list, I think due to longevity and maybe some other factors, I believe they had Wes Unseld over Willis Reed. I don't necessarily know how that goes. Maybe there were like some slight defensive little tidbits that they made that ranking. And off of longevity, let's see, Wes Unseld ended up playing. Okay, Wes Unseld played 334 more games. All right.
Yeah.
So that's
pretty legitimate. Yeah, that's a few more. Yeah. Wes Unseld's like the classic, like Willis Reed, like indicative dudes of that time that were just like big-bodied guys that could rebound and score in the post.
Obviously, a huge factor in winning as well. And
it just like really like anchored your team, you know, and like the NBA in those days was so built around funneling to that big guy who's, you know, the last person on defense, gets the rebound, gets it back out quickly. Like it was such a different league. And Wes Unseld definitely like watch those outlet pass videos. Like that is he could like get the rebound and boom, it was out. So and those Bullets teams were competitive throughout that era too.
Yeah. And one thing I will say, they get swept by the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs that year. So that was like another reason, like Willis probably like going all like Shaq on that. When Shaq lost the MVP, he would use that as motivation and just like run out of practice and be like, oh my God, I'm going to kill everybody. Maybe Willis was doing that too.
Yeah, probably.
So Willis was, I think, he was 4 years older and must have just taken that as some motivation that year.
Well, especially a rookie wins MVP. I think like if that happened in this league today, regardless of how well like Zion came in, he wins MVP, like they're not going to take it well.
Oh, people would flip.
Yeah. Like it just that's the way these guys
have to have like just an insane season. And yeah, like as we're seeing here, it was an interesting time at the very least. Like, yeah, like you don't see Oscar, you don't see Jerry West. There must have been some things going on that year.
Yeah,
It's
well,
only first place votes, I believe.
It's Bill Russell's last year.
Yeah.
68, 69. So, so it's like Wilt's just getting moved to the Lakers. So, I mean, there's that action going on.
Yeah, Russell came in fourth that year and averaged 9.9 points per game, 19.3 rebounds, 4.9 assists.
And they didn't count blocks back then.
They didn't count blocks. Very true. And Wes Unseld finishes 13.8 points per game, 18.2 rebounds, 2.6 assists. Willis Reed, 21.1, 14.5, 2.3. Willis shooting 52% from the field to 47.6% for Wes Unseld, 74.7 from the line, 14.7 win shares for Willis to 10.8 for Wes. Yeah. So there's a difference.
Yeah.
There was definitely a difference. And yeah, it's Willis playing 37.9 minutes per game and Wes playing 36.2. So minimal difference there. And still a pretty big drubbing. We weren't there at the time, but when you look at it, it leaves you wondering.
No, totally. And that's the thing, it's only through research and through, again, like these analytics, and we're just going off. Obviously, like we don't know what it'd be like if these guys all showed up at the gym tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, if in current state, yeah, we do. But hypothetically, yeah, like we don't know what that'd be like. So we're just basing that off that, and it's interesting to see what it was like back then. And I think number 5, I think we have another one. I think we're going all the way pretty close to this, still within the first decade of the NBA.
I think this is the second MVP award ever awarded in the NBA, what became the NBA, or was the NBA.
It's the NBA at this point, yeah.
Where they finally gave out the MVP award.
And somebody, like what's that meaning? Like they just figure out that like somebody's got to be the best amongst the bunch. Like, can somebody get a trophy at the end of the year?
We need some more stories to write about. So
yeah.
Give us some storylines, give us a few things so we can argue about
give a guy a trophy, and eventually we'll put it on some stupid late night primetime TV thing with some B-list host, and we'll give out awards at a banquet.
Sounds good to me.
Today. But yeah. So we're talking
like the host C-list, and you won me over.
Yeah.
So
1956, 1957.
1956, 1957. Bob Cousy wins the award. Bob Cousy is a player who I think gets relatively slept on because when you look at his statistics, you're like, what the hell is going on here? He, for his career, shoots 37.5% from the field. Things were a lot different back then. That's one thing we'll say. Like, obviously, the spacing was way different. The shooting was way different, everything. You look at him in Blue Chips when he plays the athletic director, though, and that guy is pure money.
One take, did not miss a shot. Go watch that now. It's on HBO.
But also, like, the setup for the shot, albeit a free throw, maybe gives you some idea of why it might not have had the most space.
He's not a spring chicken, but again, the shooting is, like, not the same form that we're accustomed to as much today.
Yeah. So Bob Cousy plays 64 games that year, finishes with 8.8 win shares. The next 4 guys have more win shares than Bob Cousy. Now, Bob Cousy also, the Celtics ended up with a 44-28 record. They only played 72 games. NBA, I'm looking at you. This could be a possibility here.
We can do this.
Look back at 56-57 and see what they did that season. So they play 72 games. He goes 44-28, and then Bob Pettit finishes second. And I believe the St. Louis Hawks have a losing record. Still make the NBA Finals. Like, they go 34-38, still make the NBA Finals. Pettit was known as the preeminent scorer in that time as well. And he ends up winning 2 MVPs. He wins the very first and then wins another. It was Bill Russell's first finals loss in his second season to a Bob Pettit-led team for the St. Louis Hawks. And it certainly seems like Bob Pettit has a legit beef for this award. The 2 players behind him also seem to have really solid seasons as well. Paul Arizin for the Philadelphia Warriors and Dolph Schayes for the Syracuse Nationals. Both have more win shares, but yeah, it certainly looks like Bob Pettit has a legit beef here. It's a pretty close award. Like, I think this has to be the closest because Kuzi gets 23 first place votes. Pettit gets 21.
Wow.
So neck and neck. And Pettit just squeaks it out. Or Kuzi just squeaks it out.
And look at how competitive things are too. It's like, I mean, there's like 8 teams around that time too. And it's like, there's
like a lot of parity, obviously.
There's a lot of parity, and it's funny because you look at those
and Boston wins the championship that year.
Yeah. When you look at those Celtics teams and you're like, oh, how did they get so good? And they have all these Hall of Famers. You're like, well, when you pick first, then ninth, and so on and so forth. Like you can stack up a team, like you can get a pretty good group of guys pretty quickly. So Bob Cousy also great. He was really the first showman style point guard, playmaking point guard. That like the NBA called its own, but yeah, it's hard to look back at the career and really rank him.
Yeah, not having the 3-point line, everything, like you just kind of wonder. And then
you look at those percentages and you look at that, like if there was a 3-point line, I don't know if that's going to help you.
Yeah, well, it might. I feel like it might. It might because I have a theory, and my theory is that the reason guys take longer shots now and are more proficient at longer shots is because there is a 3-point line.
Yeah, because they practice it. If you don't.
Well, also, taking any shot beyond a layup, I'm guessing, if there was no 3-point line, would probably be a bad shot.
Oh no, totally. There weren't jump shooters in the space. Like again, like the spacing hovers around that 3-point line now, whereas like they used to space to like half court practice. Like there's a lot differently laid out.
I also feel like defense was allowed to be more physical.
Yeah.
They weren't allowed to do as much dribbling. Like the hand placement on the ball was considered illegal in certain parts. So that's another thing that I think people should factor in when looking at guys dribbling during that time. But yeah, this was Bill Russell's rookie year where Kuzi won the MVP. And he's a little slept on. That's why I put him at 5th. And as you'll see, there are the 4 guys who are ranked behind him all time that are ahead of him on this list. I know we made that very confusing, but they're really good players. And I think Bob Cousy, a little bit of history needs to be factored in there. And while they will certainly have him down the list of all-time point guards, most people that feel that his game would be obsolete, you have to factor in just what he meant for that time and how much better he was than the next closest point guard.
Oh, totally. There's not other point guards in that era you're really talking about in debate.
Yeah.
So
there may have been reasons. Like I know that there were apparently a couple players that were banned from the league who might have rivaled him at the very least, but for what it was at the time, Bob Cousy was rocking it, and he is number 5 on our list, but certainly a guy that is considered high amongst all-time players.
Oh, an important person to know when you're learning NBA history, period.
For sure. And then we go to our next and final Celtic on the list. Well, there will be a player who played for the Celtics and another who I think was involved in a trade with them. But whatever. This is the final guy to win MVP as a Celtic. And this MVP victory makes so little sense to me. It's just like this one, I think there deserves to be a giant dispute here, even though the player we're talking about, Dave Cowens, was the man on a team that went 68-14 during the regular season this year, in 1972-73. The player that finishes second in MVP voting was on a team that went 60-22. So there's an 8-game difference.
Yeah.
That's something. Dave Cowens averages 20.5 points per game. They play one minute difference. So 41.8 for Dave Cowens, 42.8 for Kareem. 20.5 points per game, 16.2 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 45.2% field goal percentage, 77.9% free throw percentage, 12 win shares. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, 6 fewer games. Well, we can give that. 42.8 minutes per game, 30.2 points per game, 16.1 rebounds, 5 assists per game, almost 10% better field goal percentage, or over 10% better field goal percentage, 55.4% from the field, 71.3% from the line, 21.9 win shares.
Yeah, like, and but the thing about
That's
Kareem,
like insane difference.
every year in the 1970s, you can't not like Kareem had, 5.
It'd be one thing if the record was like, something that you could balk at.
Yeah, the 6 MVPs
But you really
was
can't.
in that 1980 season. So it's like he's got 5 MVPs within this decade, but he could have had more. Like you look at it's like you look at things like that, and it's like Dave Cowens was a great. I know he was a very heart and soul player of the team, kind of thing, but like Kareem was at his insane level of play.
Yeah, and Kareem actually finished second in MVP voting, but he was third overall. This was a season where Tiny Archibald, led the NBA in scoring, in points per game and assists per game. So really cool. And you could argue that, he had more win shares than Dave Cowens as well. Kansas City finishes with a losing record.
Yeah,
So,
I think so. Like Tiny Archibald,
kind of hard to argue that he deserved it over Kareem or Dave Cowens.
But Kareem was just the ultimate dude. I mean, even when Jerry West coached, like when Kareem goes to the Lakers, Jerry West is the coach. I think Jerry West literally said one thing the whole season as a coach, which was like, give the ball to Kareem.
Yeah. And
that's why you did it, because he was and they weren't really counting blocks at this time either, right? Or had
no, I'm sure they must have.
Kind of, but there wasn't like an official
defense. Yeah, I think it was just like, is your defense good? Yes, Kareem's is.
Yeah, and that's why like that gets Kareem. But I think Dave Cowens did possess a lot of heart and soul kind of qualities, and it's like it is the Celtics.
And they had this amazing regular season. Dave Cowens 24 at the time, Kareem 25, 68-14. They lose in the Eastern Conference Finals to the New York Knicks, who eventually win the championship that year. It's just they have to have the best regular season record of anybody ever to not make the NBA Finals.
So, about that. Yeah, all the other teams like the 69-13s have made it. The 72-10, 73-9 team.
Yeah,
that's great. But again, great. Still had a really solid career on the Celtics during what's kind of like an interesting period for the Celtics, because they were still competitive and good.
Yeah.
But it's like
Dave Cowens wins 2 rings as well.
It's just that
he wins a ring that next year, and then he wins a ring in 1975-76.
Well, but it's crazy because but it's still kind of like a middle period for the Celtics, because people either talk about Russell and those teams, or they talk about Bird.
Yeah.
Where that 70s thing, Dave Cowens, JoJo White, like doesn't get talked about as much.
Mm-hmm.
And they were still, good competitive teams. Like the NBA was, at an interesting place too. I don't think there was like, again, it was that until it took off in the 80s, like there was just like a weird period, right? I feel like the competitiveness of certain teams just wasn't there.
I think there was just a lot more parity.
Parity, yeah.
There was no team that really dominated.
Yeah.
I think in every era of the NBA, you can usually find a team that dominated that era, and there really wasn't that during the 70s.
Yeah, I feel like the 70s.
And as you can see on our list,
yeah.
with the guys win the MVP it seems like it's almost a different guy every year, even though obviously Kareem wins the most. But yeah, there are a few years where you have these guys who you might not have seen like these incredible single season accomplishments from, where it's more, it seemed like it was more of a team thing, or considered back then when it was voted among the players.
Which I think that honestly, I'm intrigued because I think that's something that the league should just bring back.
Just to have the players vote, they already do, and it's terrible, as we saw. They have the NBA awards.
Oh,
so they're definitely not as good.
Never mind. Take it back.
We saw the players voting on the All-Star game, and it's not amazing.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot.
If we had weighted MVP voting and weighted stuff, I can get that, but having the players vote on it doesn't necessarily make it better. Like in 1961-62, Bill Russell wins the MVP. You have Wilt Chamberlain averaging 50.4 points per game. You have Oscar Robertson putting up a triple-double. All these incredible individual seasons. And Bill Russell was just on the team that I guess they thought he was going to win the championship. I get they were absolutely right. So Dave Cowan's number 4. Number 3 on our list is Bob McAdoo. Now, here's one thing I'll say about Bob McAdoo.
Of the Buffalo Braves, which are now the Clippers.
Yeah.
San Diego.
So pretty awesome that a guy from the Clippers led them to an awesome record, won MVP.
So technically, the Clippers haven't been bad forever. They do have an MVP in their franchise's history.
And my mom did tell me that they did a documentary about him, and they had a song that went McAdoo, 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 doo, doo, McAdoo, 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 doo, doo. And that is really awesome.
That's pretty kicking, yeah.
The other thing I will say, it's hard to argue against him getting MVP this year. So his single MVP, he had a really, really great season. The guy who won, if you went by a full year, you could maybe argue Rick Barry, or slightly, but if you're going by the regular season, it's pretty hard to argue Bob McAdoo. Rick Barry led the Warriors to the NBA championship during the 1974-75 season, and they swept.
I'm sure all those hardcore Warriors fans out there know the history and stuff, right?
You're saying that the Warriors fans don't remember that team?
Oh, the ones that have come along in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Oh.
Don't know that team exists and don't care about it, and partly because it is Rick Barry. But yeah, and partly because it's Rick Barry, I probably won't argue too hard in his favor for the MVP award this year. He did finish 4th in voting. The guy who finished 3rd in voting had the 2nd most first place votes. That was Elvin Hayes of the Washington Bullets, who made it to the finals only to get swept by the Warriors. Dave Cowens finishes in 2nd by a pretty good margin. Bob McAdoo kind of cleans it up. He averages 34.5 points per game, 14.1 rebounds per game, shoots above 50% from the field, which if you look at the next few guys, it's not happening. Kareem finishes in 5th in MVP voting, and he has a really solid year. I just don't think Milwaukee finishes with a losing record. So it's kind of amazing that he still finished 5th in voting and shows you how great he was. But the reason Bob McAdoo is so low on this list, he ends up playing, when he finally does win rings with the Lakers, he has a very diminished role.
Yeah, he kind of journeymaned around for a while.
Yeah,
and towards the end, and of course, it's one of those things where it's the rich get richer with the Lakers, where they're like, oh, we're already a super good team, and let's just add Bob McAdoo. But again, he was like, that was Magic and Kareem. That wasn't, going to be his team, obviously.
Yeah. And then, by the time he's with the Lakers, he goes there when he's 30, and he's kind of that big bench scorer for them, and obviously makes them one of the great teams of all time. If you
Oh yeah, that's why when you look at the all-time Lakers, you look at that like that year, and you're like, wow, because they Magic.
they're big time.
Yeah,
they're big time. The other cool thing Bob McAdoo does is retires from the NBA to go play pro in Europe.
That's cool.
And I think he slayed over there as well. Like I know they had like a list of like the top 50 European players, and I believe he was on there, and playing a couple years there. It was something I always kind of felt like Kobe Bryant was going to do if injuries hadn't decimated him. And I just felt like that would have been cool. If it's just, I think it's Bob McAdoo kind of inspired me there, and I know Dominique Wilkins even spent a season in playing for, I believe, Panathinaikos and or was it Olympiacos?
I don't know. I remember.
Really sorry,
I just look at Greece, and then that.
Yeah, he was in Greece, and then he came back to the NBA for a while. But he, I just thought that was a really cool factoid about Bob McAdoo.
Well, especially at that time when like people weren't doing it, but like, the need for basketball to help grow the game and just to like travel and get to play, and pretty awesome. I got.
Yeah, he leads the NBA in scoring his first 3 seasons in the league too.
Yeah, he was definitely, he's definitely, as a kid when you open that almanac and you're looking at things, like that name always comes up in the scoring, like everything scoring related.
Yeah. So yeah, Bob McAdoo, definitely big time. Hard to argue he didn't deserve the MVP that year. He certainly seemed to have the best regular season by a pretty good margin, but I had to put him third on this list.
Yeah,
sorry, Bob.
I think again, like for him, it becomes a career achievement type thing, and again, like he just ended up being a little bit more of a journeyman than a franchise guy.
Still averages 22.1 points per game and 9.4 rebounds per game in 33.2 minutes per game for his career.
Hey, that's pretty awesome.
Balling. This next guy never averaged close to that many points per game.
Probably never averaged that many minutes a game.
Yeah.
Number two is a frequent player that we mentioned on this show a lot of times, and it's very conflicting for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. This is a tough one to rank this high. And certainly if he had more of a career, I think he would have been lower on the list, but he really didn't. He played a total of 468 regular season games.
That is Bill Walton, ladies and gentlemen.
Bill Walton.
And he won MVP 77-78. So coming off
the
Spirit of 77, that Blazers championship, we get Bill Walton. And again, when the thing with Bill Walton is when healthy, and obviously you look at, college players of all time, is like he's up there. He's in that, really he and Kareem are the two guys that have ever hit those levels in college. But
he was just so damn productive when he was healthy.
Never able to stay
so productive.
And that was his biggest thing. Because did he get hurt? How many games did he play in 77, 78?
In 77, so he played 58 total games. And when it comes to win shares, I believe he has the lowest ever for an MVP. And he, it was it was definitely he doesn't win the MVP by much.
And it's just like
George Gervin finishes in second place. He plays all 82 games. This was the one where David Thompson and he and David Thompson were fighting for the scoring title, and David Thompson scores 73 points in the last game, and Gervin scores 63 to win it by like minimal amount.
Crazy volume score. But again, these guys played 82 games. it's hard to say. Like I know you can't instate like a minimum game threshold, but you're like he's just above playing half the games.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing with him that year is if you just go by his 58 games, George Gervin wins 50. He goes 52-30 in 82 games. In the 58 games Bill Walton played, they went 48-10.
Yeah.
Like they were just so good. So he wins as many games in 58 games as the Denver Nuggets, David Thompson's team, win in 82 games. So, and then the other thing that I think adds to Bill Walton's case for this award was the Blazers' absolute below mediocrity without him.
Yeah.
So they finished 50-10 in their first 60 games, and then they end the season at 58-24.
That
They go 8-14 over the last 22 games.
That lets you know he was missing. And then isn't this kind of the end for Walton? Like after this with the Blazers?
Yeah.
Yeah, like and that's
he comes back and plays a couple games in the playoffs, but yeah, it was.
And this is it. And then
he missed a huge chunk of the season.
Yeah, and then he goes off. I think he takes some time. He goes to the Clippers. He takes some more time. He ends up on Boston.
Yeah,
he's like a big body on that 86 like Celtics and those kind of. But oh man, it's just one of those. He's the ultimate what if, because again, if he can just maintain his even 70% of that level for his career, I mean, he's in the upper echelon conversation. Whereas unfortunately, just the fact he can never stay on the court.
Yeah. It's crazy that a guy that you could build a title team around is number 2 on the list. That's the other thing. Like, there are guys that, and it could have been just the Blazers coming together at the right time, but Bill Walton certainly was a tremendous player. He was so good on both ends of the floor.
And it's indicative when you look at the Blazers' records in those adjacent years, because even before 77, I mean, they're good until Walton gets hurt, and then they're not. And then 77 was like the one year he's healthy at the right time.
Yeah,
with a championship. So always
and they were like absolutely, obviously they were an expansion team, but they were, I would say, abysmal before Bill Walton gets there.
Oh, totally. And then they get
Bill Walton like really turns them around.
And they get Maurice Lucas through the ABA kind of mergery thing. Like those are the two.
We need to get Bill Walton's like total winning percentage with the Blazers.
Yeah, we'll have to.
We should definitely calculate that. But yeah, this year, you could probably argue for either Gervin or Thompson winning MVP, but it's Bill Walton certainly has a case. And
yeah, well, then just
they felt like he deserved it. Like,
yeah, and then because he's again when he was on the court and going, he's the best player out there. There's no disputing the talent level. And unfortunately, it's just one of those things where the body just was never there. And I mean, that's just the plight of certain players. It sucks.
And if you look at win shares per 48 minutes, Kareem has the highest, but the Lakers only finished 45-37 that year. So they were 3 games behind the Nuggets, 7 games behind the Spurs, and 3 games behind Bill Walton when he was playing. Well, even more games than that because, yeah, if you went by like winning percentage, Bill Walton way ahead there. So, yeah, it seemed like this was a good year for Bill Walton to get his MVP award. And
then leave.
Unfortunately, like if you go by like total career accomplishments, Bill Walton's still a Hall of Famer, but the reason he's lower or he's higher on this list than some of the other players is just due to longevity.
Because after that, he's never the same player again either. No. Like he's
an awesome 6th man on the 85-86
on the Celtics team. But I mean, that Celtics team was so deep, especially in the front court.
Yeah,
so that's
he just made them like an all-timer.
So that was a great role to come into. But yeah, he just was never that guy again. And once you leave the Blazers, my feelings will change. So number one.
Number one, I think it's kind of obvious. This, I believe, will be the only MVP who there's even consideration for him not making the Hall of Fame. And I think right now he would probably be on the outside. Derrick Rose.
Yeah, it's a tough. I mean, I think he's having, he's had some games, he's had some resurgence.
Yeah, the year, and Derrick Rose won this by like a pretty monumental amount. Like he, out of 121 first place votes, he gets 113. So it was definitely in the cards that year. And a huge factor, one, he's super exciting. He's also an offensive force on his team that was constructed really well defensively, and just a really good team overall. And they finished with the best record in the NBA. So they go 62-20. And the NBA was put into this absolute stupor, and there were lots of stories that year, and not necessarily the most positive stories about a certain group in Miami and a certain decision that LeBron James shot with Jim Gray that had a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth.
Ugh, God, well, it was like an hour-long thing.
He announced it like 20 minutes. Come on. As soon as he announced it, I changed the channel.
Just like, I feel like he faxed me at that point. Like, geez, like, yeah, no.
But the money went to the Boys and Girls Club, man.
He still had the money. That didn't affect the money. But yeah, no,
first MVP.
D Rose was so quick. He had such a boost.
Oh yeah, and he was just crazy explosive.
Yeah. And Dwight Howard was playing well at the time for the Magic.
Yeah. Dwight Howard had a great season as well. They didn't necessarily win as many games as the year before. They had lost Hito Turkoglu. So they finished 52-30. Dwight Howard. This was when Dwight Howard also was like a defensive monster.
Yeah, and he was like
a mega man of defense.
He could take Dwight Howard at a time in his career, could take a team to the finals, which he did.
Yeah, the year before.
Yeah.
They lose in the first round this year.
Yeah.
In this season, 2010-11, they lose in the first round. But yeah, I remember John Hollinger writing an article saying how Dwight Howard deserved the MVP this year, and pointing to his statistic PER and lots of other things. And I could say that I think you absolutely have a case for Dwight Howard deserving the MVP over Derrick Rose this year. The guy who I believe deserved the MVP over Dwight Howard, and who nobody was talking about because everybody seemed to know, just had no chance of winning the MVP this season, due to the things that we mentioned before, LeBron James. LeBron James, like, I think everybody was just kind of down on the Heat that season and nothing they would have done unless they went like 82-0 or like won 70 games.
A lot of these things are emotionally driven, and I think
they're story driven.
Yeah. The story, and it's again, there's nothing about like the best player in the league going to a team with two of the other best players in the league and being the best player on this team that's really good. Like, it all adds up to people not caring as much for LeBron. But I mean, I think D Rose had claim to MVP because again, like, the Bulls were good, and you look around that team and it wasn't like it was well assembled, but it wasn't
like when Iverson won MVP.
Yeah,
it was really well assembled.
Because what happened was once Derrick Rose eventually gets hurt,
they're still okay. Like, that's the thing.
They weren't like.
They're maybe not the same level but yeah, like I don't think were they ever like super bad. Like I don't know.
I don't think they dipped totally, but they weren't like as competitive. Like, I mean, he had them as the number one seed in the
league. But like obviously Derrick Rose is going to make a team better. But if LeBron James leaves your team, then you're like decimated. Oh. Yeah. And I think there's a legit case of LeBron James winning the MVP that season and having 5 MVPs in a row. Very legitimate. And I know you could even argue that in the season where Kobe did win his lone MVP, some people will say Chris Paul. I think LeBron James had a case there as well.
Well, he's a guy that you look at it. I mean, every year he's healthy, he's got to be in the top few. Like,
yeah.
Well,
very true.
MVP race is not being healthy, which has only happened really last season. I mean, for the most part, he's had a pretty good career in that respect.
Yeah. And so people will point, I'm sure, to the playoffs and say LeBron had a disappointing NBA Finals, but look at the conference finals. that's where I think he was just kind of owning Derrick Rose there. Like the conference finals that you're in, they win the first game. It's like one of those, you can kind of compare it to Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
The great first game
and the energy
sweep.
Yeah, the energy is there, and then it gets deflated really super quickly.
Yeah, and then the other thing that was happening. So as you can see, like you just look at their comparative statistics when they played each other in that conference finals. And then the other thing is that LeBron James would guard him at the end of the game. And Derrick Rose was like flummoxed. He just had
who? Again, I can't fault him for that. Like,
yeah.
And that Miami team is super deep. But yeah, like I think like for Derrick Rose, again, it's one of those sad things. I don't know if he would have won another MVP, but at least like been in that top of the NBA conversation. And again, similar to Walton, just the body doesn't cooperate.
Yeah, well, I think everybody felt like Derrick Rose winning the MVP at that young of an age, because I believe he is the youngest MVP of all time. And he, winning it at that young of an age, being the best player on a team that had title aspirations that year before going up against a team that just had their number. And the injuries certainly are the reason why he's not a Hall of Fame player, among some other things. But he has, to me, he has to be the low guy on this list.
Oh, for sure. In the retrospective, like, again, everyone else, I mean, Russell
Westbrook came out the gates, looked absolutely like a guy who would end up being the best point guard in the NBA, as many had predicted from him, due to his unique scoring ability and just insane speed and explosion.
Like a great athletic skill set.
Yeah. But he, the injury really hurt. And then the other thing I don't think people anticipated, or at least I didn't anticipate, is Russell Westbrook ended up being the best player in that draft class. And a huge part of that was due to his durability.
Yeah, I know Russell's like pretty much had a lot of really healthy. Again, and that's just the difference between sometimes between players is just who can stay healthy. And
yeah, but I felt like this MVP award at the time, because I was a big Derrick Rose fan too, and like he was on the best team. Yeah. He had an amazing season, but I just, when you go back and look at it, LeBron, I feel like LeBron should have won MVP. If you took emotion out of the equation,
maybe, but
you never do.
Yeah, probably, but like overall, I'm gonna say, like, I'm not gonna stay up and cry over LeBron.
I will.
I think he's done. I'll
do that for you.
I think he's moved on okay. I think he's done relatively all right for himself. He's got some other MVP awards. He's got some championship. He's got maybe a championship this year. Whereas Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose kind of just has games every once in a while that are like.
Yeah. He had a big comeback season this year.
No, he's playing. He's playing pretty well, but he's never.
It's been like all right, like the last couple years, you could say.
Yeah, but he's never going to be back to that. First team conversation. All-star, like those days are gone.
Yeah. Well, it happened. Sorry to say, And
Yeah, no, totally. It sucks because I mean, again, in college, I mean, he's one of those guys. It's like in
oh
college,
man, in college.
to the
So,
championship. Obviously, that didn't end well, but
yeah,
close enough. I mean,
they were close.
maybe someone took the SATs for him too. Also, didn't help him. Some other things, but yeah, just he was physically a great player, just not able to maintain that, and that's what sucks. But yeah, I feel like you look at the list of MVPs, he's probably the only dude that's like right now probably not going to make the Hall of Fame. I mean, I think Westbrook and Harden are shoe-ins.
Yeah,
Giannis,
Giannis certainly on his
Giannis
way.
is on pace. I mean, he would really
Yeah.
have to dip.
We really, really hope Giannis just stays healthy and
Oh my God, Giannis, please stay
one of the
healthy.
best players in the league for many years to come.
Yeah, oh totally. Like I don't wish injury upon any player. Like I want everyone to go for
And
it.
the other thing is, if once they announce the MVP this season, I don't know. I don't want to spoil this for anybody, but it's going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah.
I know LeBron James will probably have a few votes and had a spectacular season as well. But yeah, Giannis is going to win MVP.
Yeah. Oh,
so that'll be a second award, and yeah, we're just hoping for more great things.
Well deserved, and
and yeah, that was our list. If you guys have any disagreements, well, we'll probably just disagree right back with you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we want to see disagreements. We want debate. We love starting debates and having this dialogue with people who are listening to the show. I know when I get a text from my friends, like arguing about a list, I love it. And I love hearing anybody listening to the show. So if you have a beef with our list, if you think somebody else should have been MVP, or if you think there are other hotly contested MVP votings over history, definitely leave us a link in the comments or leave us a link on Twitter.
Yeah, let us know.
Anywhere else. Just let us
email us. We are at viselandpod@gmail.com. You can send us an email. Yeah, look at the history of the MVP award. If there's people you really want to speak up for, disagree with, let us know. That's the way we have this debate. We're going to be having some more episodes soon, so there'll be some more things for us to debate. Also, the best news of all, we might have actual basketball coming back in the next month.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe. We'll see how that works out.
And there has been some basketball like in Spain and
they're playing in China
with a great game for Maccabi Tel Aviv against Ashdod the other day. So yeah, there are some European teams already playing. NBA we'll keep monitoring.
Yeah, well,
if there are games, we will let you know. But as you know, my Twitter name, NBA Draft Mikey V. We will have some NBA draft stuff for you. I'm trying to get JV caught up on everything, and then we'll get some good NBA draft content to you as well. But we hope you're enjoying these history breakdowns that we're doing, and just leave us a like or
give us a
review. It'll help us out tremendously.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening to Viseland.